Hey, boys and girls, this is Mrs. Lambert-Torres here, part of the science team at MCIS. Last week, we talked about the plant life cycle, and we also talked about the parts of a plant and their functions. So since we know about the parts of the plant, this week we're actually going to be diving into different species of plants. So this week we are going to have an introduction to native and invasive plants. Those are the two types that we will be discussing. Our learning target this week is I can identify the differences between native and invasive plants. And with that, we want to look at what the key features of each of those are and what are the benefits of native plants. So that's what we will be working on this week. Native plants. Native plants are plants that have occurred naturally in a particular region, ecosystem, or habitat without human introduction. That means those plants that are native, they've been here since the land has been here. We have some benefits to native plants. Number one, they provide a better habitat for the wildlife. Number two, native plants keep the water healthy. That includes rivers, lakes, and if we live near an ocean, it would be an ocean. Any bodies of water that native plants live near, they help that water be cleaner, cooler, and healthier. And number three, animals depend on native plants for food and shelter. So not only are these plants important for making sure they have clean drinking water, but also native plants are critical for the food and the shelter that our animals and wildlife need. These are some examples of Kentucky native plants. Now, by no means are these all of our native plants. These are just 4 examples. So the top one is called a spice bush. It's a host for swallowtail butterflies. The second one down is a common milkweed plant. It is a host for monarch butterflies, and it's also a good source of nectar. And I'm going to be talking about nectar in just a few seconds. In the middle where you see those red berries, that's called a winterberry. That plant is interesting because it needs the male and the female plants to produce those red berries. And those birds really like to eat those red berries, and they attract the birds. So those are very important. And then you see the pink tree, and that's called a redbud. In the spring, that's when it looks like this, and it's a beautiful tree to look at, but it's very important because it's also an early source of nectar. So in those spring months when plants are just starting to grow, the redbud is an early source of nectar for a lot of the insects and animals around Kentucky. Now, speaking of nectar, nectar is very important because it is the source. It's the sugar source of honey. So bees come around and collect nectar from trees and plants and flowers and bushes, and they take it back to their hives, and it helps produce that honey. Also, nectar serves as a food source for lots of animals, but I found interesting that there's some species of wasps that like to drink nectar. And what's important is this species of wasp actually goes and eats certain types of caterpillars that are bad for crops. Those caterpillars actually eat the crops and kill them. So our farmers who plant all these crops, it's important to them to be able to grow those. And that nectar that gives the energy to the wasps, those wasps go and eat those bad caterpillars. So it all comes back to the circle of life and how we need these native plants in order for our habitat to thrive. So again, these are just some examples, but these are ones that I thought you may have seen. There's lots of others. And in a video you'll be watching, you will see several different types of native plants and trees. Now, we're kind of moving into the plants that are not so good. They are called invasive plants. And if you think about the word invasive, another form of that word is invading. So think about the word invading. These plants are invading our habitats and our environment. So invasive plants is a special group of plants that take over by outcompeting native plants. These plants have been brought to this area. So these are not plants that have originally grown here. People have brought them here, or they have gotten here by other means, and they are not native. So when we say they are outcompeting native plants, these key features that I'm going to be discussing at the bottom, that numbers 1, 2, and 3, those numbers 1, 2, and 3, these show how they outcompete us. It's kind of like they can beat native plants. So number 1 is power in numbers. They reproduce, and we learned about that last week with the seed, and how the fruits and things that plants create, the fruits, nuts, seeds, that helps the plants continue to reproduce, and that means make more plants. So they reproduce and spread quickly. Number 2 is tough. They're hard to kill and they're hard to remove. Because they do spread quickly, and that means grow a whole bunch of plants very quickly, it's hard to get to all the roots and get those out of the ground to kill them, so they continue to spread. And then the third reason is no predators. Local wildlife do not prefer to eat them. So the animals around our area, they like native plants. They like, for instance, on last week's video, that walnut tree. The deer and the squirrels and animals like to eat those walnuts. They don't like to eat what invasive plants grow, and they don't like to eat the leaves and things like that on invasive plants. So they're kind of the last resort. So because the animals aren't eating them, there's more of them. They continue to grow and grow and grow and grow, while the native plants are losing some of the nutrients that the invasive plants are using. And also they're getting used. They're getting eaten by the wildlife. So the invasive plants are not good for our area. Here are some examples of some invasive plants that I thought you may have seen. There's the garlic mustard at the top. And then below that, you have the winter creeper. And I've actually had some of this around my house, and it is so hard to get rid of. And I feel like every spring it keeps coming back, and it grows anywhere. And then the other is the bush honeysuckle. It's a beautiful bush, and sometimes they smell nice, but it is invasive and it is not good for our habitat. Now, the one thing I want to kind of bring home is native plants are critical for our area. It's essential that we allow them to continue to grow, and if we have the chance to plant more of them, that we do that. That's what's going to make our water clean. It's going to be what helps our animals have enough homes to live in, shelter, and also enough food to eat. So we need to get rid of those invasive plants and try to help our native plants prosper and grow. Now, after you've viewed this, make sure you go back to your assignments page or your classwork page on your Google Classroom, and make sure you hit that assignment so that you can be sure to do your assignment for today. It's just a quick check. And in the future, we will be asking you to be going outside to see if you can find any native and invasive plants in your area and to show examples of those. So that's something to be looking forward to and to be thinking about. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope you learned lots. Remember, be nice to our native plants and help them grow. Have a great day.